الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين وبعد. Last week we spoke about knowledge, ilm, and the acquisition of knowledge and the importance of knowledge. And we spoke about the three elements of holistic application of Islam. As the Prophet ﷺ informed Jibreel ﷺ in the famous hadith wherein Jibreel comes to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him about Islam, Iman and Ihsan. And so each of these areas is an area that the believer should try to apply himself within. The acquisition of understanding of the rulings of Islam, the everyday rulings, the pillars of Islam, the halal and the haram, the acquisition of understanding of Iman, that which relates to belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messengers and angels, etc. And the third, that which relates to character, that which relates to heart, that which relates to the actions of the heart and the purity of the soul and the heart. There is a famous hadith wherein the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحْلُمِ. That knowledge is acquired through study, through the journey of acquisition, through effort, putting mind to book and pen to paper, sitting with the teachers. Likewise, hilm. And hilm is like a goodness of character, an easygoing quality of character. A person who overlooks the mistakes of others, a person who is not angered easily, a person who is very easy to deal with. And he said that al-hilmu bit-tahallum. Just as knowledge is to be acquired, good character is to be acquired. A person may not be a halim, he may not be a person who is easygoing, but he can acquire that character trait. How so? By teaching himself, by learning, by getting to know himself. And this is the path of Islam. At-ta'allum wa-tahallum. Learning and applying ourselves, refining our intellectual states and refining our spiritual and character states. This is what Islam is. And there are many sicknesses, many issues that we have in our ummah today. They go back to this area. A lack of character refinement, a lack of spiritual understanding. One of those sicknesses, arrogance. Another of those sicknesses, mockery. Another of those sicknesses, looking down on others. another of those sicknesses, and one that is becoming very problematic: discriminating against others based upon their race or their ethnicity. These are all sicknesses of the heart. These are all satanic approaches to living, where one looks down upon another, or one accuses another, or one discriminates against another based upon some sort of physical difference between them. The Prophet ﷺ, he came to rid us of these evils. The Prophet ﷺ, he can purify us as the human race from these disgusting traits. But unfortunately today, we have revived some of these traits in the name of Islam. And in doing so, we don't realize that we are not only affecting our iman, we are not only dividing our ummah, but we are also giving the wrong impression to those onlookers who do not know what Islam is. When they see an Islam for Southeast Asians, an Islam for Arabs, an Islam for Afro-Caribbeans, an Islam for Africans, an Islam for this ethnicity and that ethnicity, how can we then try to tell them that Islam came to unite us as one ummah? How can we then tell them that Islam is the deen of the prophets from Adam ﷺ to the Prophet ﷺ, and Islam is the deen that does not discriminate, does not differentiate, and brings unity to those who once knew disunity? When we look at the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, we find some of them were from the Arabs, some of them were from the Persians, some of them were from the Africans. And as Islam spread its wings left and right, the rulers of Islam came from different ethnic groups. The followers of Islam came from different ethnic groups. If you look to the history of our revivers, the revivers of Islam, you will find we have revivers from the Arabs, we have revivers from the Asians, we have revivers from the Africans, we have revivers from the Europeans, we have revivers of Islam, the Caribbeans, we have revivers of Islam from every single color, ethnicity that exists on this planet today, with the condition that Islam has reached them. A friend of mine, I was informing some of the brothers, he was one of the reasons for Islam to enter into a land far off from the UK, and a land which until today is not very well known, Papua New Guinea. And the inhabitants of Papua New Guinea, you have the indigenous inhabitants, those that are native to the land, and you have those that migrated to the land, Papua New Guinea. And some of them, they still live in the tribal settings and circumstances within deep jungles in Papua New Guinea. One of the individuals that gave them Islam was a white man from the UK. Why? Because his mission was guidance of others. He didn't care what color they were. He didn't care what ethnicity they came from. He didn't care what background they had. He wanted to provide and facilitate guidance for others so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be pleased with him. We are responsible for the guidance of ourselves, our families, our communities, and those non-Muslims that don't know anything about Islam. If we can only see things through the sickness of color, then we are failing ourselves. Why? Because we have not actually understood Islam. And we are failing others. Why? Because we are naturally going to discriminate against others based upon color. Why? Because we see through the lens of color. The Prophet ﷺ did not see through the lens of color. The companions did not see through the lens of color. The tabi'een did not see through the lens of color. Islam is guidance for mankind. Full stop. And this is our mission. This is one of the reasons Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us here today. Whether we understand that or we do not understand that. Perhaps on Yawm al-Qiyamah we will be questioned about our neighbors, about our communities, about the individuals that we used to work with. We will be questioned for our actions that perhaps we were not aware of. We need to take this matter seriously. And if we find that we have ill feelings towards others due to their color or their ethnicity, or in fact their social status or their social class, or any reason that is unjustified. And how do we know if it's justified or unjustified? By going back to Islam. Not by going to anything else, by going back to Islam. If we find that we have those feelings, we need to rectify our hearts. And we need to re-educate ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ, he called the rich to Islam just as he called the poor to Islam. He called those of high social status to Islam just as he called those of low social status to Islam. The Prophet ﷺ did not discriminate, and the Prophet ﷺ was not concerned with a person's background. Likewise, that should be our case. An example of this, an example that some may be uncomfortable with. We're willing to sit down and to discuss Islam with a person who is heavily involved in drug dealing. Someone who's heavily involved in selling serious drugs and making money off of the back of the misery of others. But yet, if a person were to suggest sitting down with a police officer to discuss Islam with him, he would see this as something which is unacceptable, something which he cannot do. Why? What's the reason there? We have to assess ourselves. We have to ask ourselves questions. Islam is refinement. We do not enter into Islam or start to practice Islam and accept ourselves for who we are. No, we ask questions of ourselves. Why do I have this feeling towards this person or these people or that person or that group? Why are those feelings there? Are those feelings valid? And if they are not valid according to the principles of Islam, what am I going to do about them? That's what Islam is. Actions of the heart. And this is something that we should take very seriously, because people are leaving their deen due to the discrimination they find from particular groups of the Muslims. And that's unacceptable. And there's no justification for that. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts of any sicknesses and illnesses therein. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide us with the lens of Islam and Iman, and to allow us to see this dunya through the lens of Islam and Iman and nothing else. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring unity to our ummah, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those that He purifies. Allahumma ya arham ar-rahimin, ya akram al-akrimin, Allahumma ya mujib al-da'awat, Allahumma tahhir fasad qulubina, Allahumma tahhir fasad qulubina, Allahumma tahhir fasad qulubina ya Rabb al-alamin, Allahumma faqihna fi ad-din wa 'allimna at-ta'wil, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa arda 'an as-sahabati ajma'in wa aqim as-salah.